Hello and welcome to another episode of Master Plant Talk. As always, I am your host, Tyler Hurst of Microdose Yoga, and I am here with Jennifer Murphey, who is in the midst of a lawsuit against a host of government agencies. So we first met a couple of years ago. We met in person, and I believe you were either starting or you were in process of filing a lawsuit against the multiple government agency. I know there's been some developments in the case. Could you talk a little bit about what that lawsuit is about, where you're at? Just sort of give us your intro and an update as to what is going on with all of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So I'm an attorney and I quit my job. I just wasn't happy and I knew I wanted to do something big for people. I became an attorney because I wanted to be a voice for suppressed voices. It's something that's been in my heart ever since I was a little kid. And I've been around my whole life those who have been diagnosed with mental health conditions and addicts. And that's just something it's very close to my heart. And I have noticed from a young age how the system is just such a failure. It fails people, it hurts people. There's really no human in the system. To me, that's the core of everything. There's nothing about humans and recognizing the unique human experience. I've always wanted to do something big. And I went to law school with the idea that I wanted to do something big. And something that really fascinated me in law school was just how much a lawsuit can change things. It can change things on a more significant level than legislation, than policy changes, because you have a lawsuit, and once the United States Supreme Court or another high court says makes their decision on that lawsuit, that can change everything. It's one of the most effective ways to essentially dismantle a system. It's because with laws and lobbying and like creating legislation, it's very subjective, it's very vague. And then it takes the courts to say what a law means.
Right. Okay.
Yes. But it takes someone to bring it to the courts for the courts to then say, okay, this law means this. And there's so much analysis that can go into that. But once the courts, the judge casts judgments on what is right and what it cannot continue, that's significant. So,
Okay.
yes. So, yeah, that always fascinated me. Wasn't an attorney for long. I worked in food service and everything before that. Didn't really have a lot of savings in retirement, like barely any. And I quit my job. I took a big risk, but it was worth it. It was a huge leap of faith. I don't know when the seed for the lawsuit came in, but around that time, like pretty soon in the beginning, it came in. And once I get a seed of something that's like a challenge, I know I'm going to do it. So
All right.
it was, I didn't know how. I didn't know, it took a lot of creativity, working up in the ethers. Just started creating up here. The end of 2021, I was already researching. I was already trying to create ways of how can I do this? Like we all know, most of us know it's wrong. There's the war on drugs and everything. It's harmful. But I had to really learn the energy of it and see, what all was happening. And I was able to get to like the core of it, like back to the beginning of creation and everything. And I had to essentially figure out, okay, now let me look at the laws, look at the Constitution, let me do research. And I researched like decades of paperwork, of documents related to drug scheduling. And this includes the World Health Organization, because I'm challenging not just the Controlled Substances Act, but the 2 international treaties whereby the World Health Organization and other UN entities decide how things are scheduled and then essentially command the countries who are a part of those treaties to follow those scheduling regimes. Anyone could have done this, but and I tried contacting law firms, I tried doing all these things, and no one would respond, no one would do it, no one would help me. And I was like, you know what? I'm blessed with a brilliant mind, and I can take a lot of information and I can create stuff, and I know I can write this and I can form this in there. And then I had to get creative with the claims. Like, I know this is wrong, but how is it wrong? And I created some very strong claims, which I can go into later. Like it's going to be a lot. It truly is the most significant lawsuit in history to end the war on drugs. Right. No one has ever dissected it the way I have, and no one has ever brought a wholesale claim against the entire thing. I'm not sure why. Like when I was doing the research, it blew me away how obvious the unlawful actions by the government were. I mean, it is
Okay.
just so obvious. And I was
Okay.
like, how has no one done this before? Even talking to other attorneys, like they don't get it. There's a lot of programming in societies, like something that made it where we are okay with this that has been going on for over 55 years. And it blows my mind that we're okay with this. But I found a lot of, I think there's a lot of other attorneys that are scared. I put my career on the line. I put everything on
Yeah.
the line to do
Yeah.
this. I couldn't find anybody to be able to kind of think outside of the box to and have that passion and that drive to, yes, I truly want to make change. It's like, okay, is there money in it? You know, we have to follow the system because I'm not following the conformed, system. I'm blowing it all out of the water. So yeah, I had to do it by myself. And I made that decision. It was an honor to make that decision. It was like, you know what? If in my lifetime, if I can sue the United States, like, why not? I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how amazing is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So now you're in, let's say, is it 2022 now? You have the seed, you start
Yeah.
constructing your argument. What goes into that? What goes into the construction of an argument? Like, how are you building that?
That was quite a creative process. Quite a creative process. And it really confirmed to me of why I went into law, because law, it's an art. It can be such an art, but it's like mental magic. Like if you can just take things, information, and be so creative with it and to form it into something that now it is a concept. It's like you're creating brand new intellectual concepts. And then now it's my job to like sell that essentially to the courts
Right.
at least.
Right.
And it's such a unique concept that I created that I've been finding it like people just don't get it. They don't. I really don't know. Maybe like a couple people that knows about this that actually truly understand. Even attorneys when they read it don't get it. Um, and so that is my challenge because even the courts they just don't get it. It's such a new way of thinking. And so for about 3 months, I just dove deep into that
Okay.
energy.
Okay.
And to fuel me, because I was doing it for the people. I was doing it
Right.
for my love of humanity, my love of
Right.
humans, my love of, going back to the beginning of what makes me come alive. It's learning everyone's individual, beauty, everyone's individual magic. And what I saw, working in the energies is what the war on drugs is it's essentially, it's like a heavy blanket that suppresses individuality, our
Yeah.
magic.
Yeah.
It separates us from, because, the controlled substances deals with CNS drugs, central nervous system drugs. So the only drugs that are controlled under these laws are ones that have the potential to affect our emotions, our thoughts, our spirit,
Mhm.
and and the ones that numb our emotions and numb our thoughts,
Yeah.
those are legal.
Yeah.
The
Of course.
ones that have the potential to expand our emotions, expand our thoughts, our connection and our connection to ourselves are illegal. And I could see that, and I could see how much shame it has cast upon individuals. Just saw so many broken spirits that people not like. I was volunteering in a homeless shelter right before this, and that was really, like the straw that broke the camel's back. And everyone that would come and sit across the table from me, I was writing resumes for them, they wouldn't be able to look me in the eye because they genuinely felt they were worthless. And that just, yeah, I was like, this is not, and I saw it as the result of the programming of
Yes.
you're a criminal, you're bad, you're a detriment to
Yeah.
society. And they
Yep.
felt that and they walked around as though that is truly who they are. And based on what I said earlier, I've been through that. I know what it's like to walk around not knowing your magic and not believing in yourself. And I didn't want anyone to feel that. And I saw one of the sources of that was this war on drugs. Like, it's huge. We criminalize so many people, tell them they're bad for using non-prescription drugs, non-commercial profitable drugs, all for money. And it has crushed the spirits of so many people. And for the future of humanity and Mother Earth and everything, I think it's so important. I want every individual to have the best opportunity to remember who they are and how much better off we will be as humanity. And so this, by challenging the war on drugs and trying to end that, to me, what I saw is lifting that blanket of control, lifting that separation.
It's summer 2022, and you have decided you are suing the United States, the DEA, Health and Human Services, and the state of Arizona.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to finish it, yes, by my 40th birthday, and I finished it with 12 hours to spare. I was so proud of myself.
Good job.
And then I filed it in like a month or so later. I filed it July, I believe it was 23rd of 2022 or July 21st. I don't remember. Okay, so yeah, I filed the complaint, and then I was still creating, and I was like, there's still something missing, you know? And so during those 6 months, still working with the energy, still creating, and then I figured out a way. I wanted to add the FDA because I know they have their hands in this big time. And I'm like, I want to find a way to add the FDA.
Okay.
And I did, because they're the ones who allow, you know, they're the ones who approve drugs. Okay. And so how I ended up adding them, so like the two claims that have remained throughout this process are, well, there's the First Amendment freedom of thought, which is one that I added, and that's what I'm most passionate about, and I'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
And the other one is due process. So when I was going through and I was researching, at the time, fortunately, I had 2 recent scheduling evaluations. So what happens is once a substance, a drug, or whatever comes to the purview, I guess, comes to the attention of the DEA, meaning it has potential to, if it's a CNS drug, if it has potential to affect our thoughts. I mean, what they say is it have a potential for abuse, but no one really questions what abuse means. And that's what I did, and we'll go into that.
Yeah.
So, but essentially, does this have potential to cause people's emotions, moods, and thoughts to change? If it does, we're looking at it. Wow. So that's the first threshold. So once a substance, you know, has a potential to affect the population's minds, they're like, okay, we want to look at this. Can we make money off of it is the first question.
Right.
If we can, meaning is this through a pharmaceutical company, then we're going to approve it, but we're going to make sure it has to go through the FDA, it has to go through them. The FDA gets they're 75% funded by pharmaceutical companies. And the pharmaceutical companies are at the table with negotiations.
Hold up. The FDA is 75% funded by the people that it has a hand in regulating?
Exactly. Yeah, so that's how I was able to add them. I'm like, wait a second. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, so once a drug comes to the attention, like whether it's through a pharmaceutical company, because they have to submit new drug applications to get approved to the FDA, they submit an application. Right. And if there's anything indicating that it might affect our thoughts or our moods, you know, then the DEA gets flagged, and they're like, hey, this should be scheduled so it's controlled, so that we get to say who, you know, we get the money. If it's going to affect people's minds, they're going to want it. So so actually what happens then, once a substance or a drug comes to the DEA's attention, they then defer the scheduling evaluations to Health and Human Services, which is why I'd added them, because it says that in the Controlled Substance Act. But with further digging, I found that actually Health and Human Services further defers it to the FDA. So it's the FDA that are doing the scheduling evaluations of what will be criminalized and what will not be criminalized. It's the FDA, the ones who are 75% funded by the pharmaceutical companies, and they approve these pharmaceutical drugs 90% of the time. Fast track.
That's weird.
There's only one person that has to approve them.
Huh, that's weird.
Yeah, I know. So interesting. So that's why I was able to add the FDA. It was for my due process claim, because the due process is essentially before you can take away someone's liberty rights. And here it's, there's lots of liberty rights here. Our right to privacy, our right to be free from imprisonment was kind of the main one. And our right to informed consent, like to freedom of choice with our healthcare, everything. Before they can take away liberty rights, which are a step below fundamental rights. Fundamental rights they can't really take away, but they can take away liberty rights as long as there's due process. My argument, my claim is that there is no due process here. We have the FDA. I mean, there were so many examples. We have the FDA is the one who's saying what will be criminalized and what won't be criminalized, and that they're funded and have their hand in it. There's conflict of interest there. And also just how they evaluate drugs that come from pharmaceutical companies versus ones that do not come from pharmaceutical companies. I tried to do a side-by-side comparison. Couldn't even really do it because it was just night and day difference.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was just, okay, pharmaceutical company, we're just going to ignore all these legal requirements. We're going to, whatever. And as long as you check these boxes that you have done these tests, we're going to approve you and you're going to be fine. We're going to schedule you in Schedule 2 or above, which means it's legal to possess as long as you go through their drug dealer. But if it doesn't come from a pharmaceutical company and it has the potential to affect your thoughts and minds, and they're not going to be able to get money from it because it doesn't come from a pharmaceutical company, Schedule 1, you're going to get thrown in prison if you have this substance that doesn't have the government's label on it.
Answer this question, but they don't even have to prove that it causes harm. They just have to prove that it changes people's minds. It has the potential to change people's minds, emotions, not even that it causes harm. I mean, everything in the wrong dosage can cause harm. Like dosage is usually the amount, but
exactly.
Wow.
It has
they don't
nothing
have
to
to
do
prove
with
that it's
harm.
harmful.
It actually has nothing to do with harm. The way they schedule and everything has nothing to do with harm. And it's really simple to to see that is to look at legal pharmaceuticals and to actually do the research, which I have, of how much harm they cause. I mean, and these are all, everything I'm talking about is controlled substances. And so not like blood pressure medication or whatever. That's not in my field, it's not my purview. So, benzodiazepines, all these different things, so harmful, can cause addiction within just a few days. Benzodiazepines are one of the hardest drugs to get off of. And people are scared to get off of them because it can cause death to get off of them. It can cause permanent injury, seizures, all these things. And that's just the withdrawal. That's just one element of it. The harm of these legal pharmaceuticals, I mean, it leads to hundreds of thousands of deaths due to, additional disease, because that's what happens when we cut off and we replace our own natural healing mechanisms with a drug that just shuts that off. And it has to do with our emotions and everything that our body needs to process. It's deadly. And it's tough.
I mean, I was on SSRIs for years, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like SSRIs, I don't know if they were going to kill me, but they made me want to kill myself. So, which is essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just cuts things off. It cuts us off and turns us into robots. And I've heard from so many people, a lot of people have been on benzos, and that's one of the common things I hear is it turned me into a zombie. It turned me into a zombie. That's an easy way to control people. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Equilibrium. This is exactly that. I actually quoted that movie in my appeal to the Ninth Circuit. I'm like, this is exactly like Equilibrium.
Nice.
Okay, so in January 2023, I filed an amended complaint, and the amendments that I did were to add the FDA, which we talked about, and was so happy to add them. And then I added a First Amendment claim, freedom of thought, which I mean, it was all meant to be, because that is the core of all of this, is the freedom of thought claim.
Yes.
And it's not what most people are going to think immediately when they hear that. It's not about our freedom to think. It's not about that. So the Constitution is, we have to start there. And it's actually quite beautiful. The Constitution, what it does is, the Bill of Rights, the amendments, is, so we have natural rights as humans. As humans, to have this human experience on earth. We're all created equal, and we all are supposed to have equal opportunity to live our human existence and have our human experience how we please, as long as it doesn't harm anybody else. And there's certain protections that naturally come with being human. One of those protections is to have to feel and to think as we please. Because that is something that is so internal. That is something that involves no one else. To me, it's probably the most sacred rights, freedoms that we have. It's because that's the only thing as humans that we have, because that is the one thing that is ours. We choose whether to express our thoughts, our feelings. And then at that point, it can be essentially judged, because now you might be involving other people. So the First Amendment covers freedom of speech, freedom of belief. It has kind of various freedoms that stem out from freedom of speech. And one of those freedoms is freedom of thought. And what it says is that the government cannot intrude on those rights. That's the purpose of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, is that the government is just putting it out there. Government, you cannot interfere with these. I think it's the most beautiful protection we have is the freedom of thought. Because again, that is something that is all internal, and the government is prohibited from even entering that space, especially for reasons of punishment. They cannot go in and say, what are you thinking? We don't want you thinking that. It's going to punish you. We're going to deprive you of a government benefit. We're going to do whatever based on what we think your thoughts are. It is a very strict line. And the United States Supreme Court has outlined this particular freedom of thought, and has defined that that's what it is that it is a realm, it is a internal realm that the government cannot go in. They cannot go in. Because it's impossible anyways. You can never know what someone's actual thoughts are. We can express them, but that will still never be exactly what they are. That's something, it's the most sacred thing we have. And I think it's so beautiful that the United States Supreme Court has recognized this. And there's been cases that has said, based on national security, we need to go into these people's minds to see what they might be thinking, because we don't want them to overthrow our government. So they have cited reasons for national security. They have cited reasons for, there's a case that I cited where it was criminalized to possess material, which were like magazines, that the government deemed obscene, because the government did not want certain thoughts to occur in a person's mind by viewing that material. And the United States Supreme Court struck that down. And time again, there hasn't been that many, because the government hasn't dared go into that sacred realm too often, at least not brought to the courts. But it is such a clear, strict thing that there is no justification allowed. The government absolutely cannot enter our thoughts, investigate our thoughts, try to determine what our thoughts might be for the purpose of criminalization, of punishing or denying a benefit. They just can't do that.
Right.
The government also is prohibited from justifying laws to prevent future crime. They gave examples, you can't prohibit the possession of chemistry books just because someone might create a bomb. That's another thing. If the government were to come and say, and a lot of people, the society actually thinks this, they're for the war on drugs, because in their minds, it leads to less crime. They think people doing non-prescription drugs leads to crime, and therefore it should be criminalized, should be penalized, because we want to prevent other crime. Yeah, there's so many fallacies, there's so many things where people just aren't thinking that through. But that's something the government cannot say that we are criminalizing the possession of these substances because it could cause you to assault another, or to commit armed robbery or something. There's already criminal penalties for that. What the Controlled Substances Act criminalizes is a very harmless act, is simply holding in your hand, having in your pocket a product. A product. That's it. That's harmless in and of itself. And that simple act has led to the imprisonment of millions of people, and the harm, the shame, the broken spirits of millions and millions, the separation of families, all because they held in their hand a product that doesn't have the government's label on it. It's a very harmless act. There is no other law out there that has caused this much harm for such a harmless act. What they care about is what happens internally in your mind, to your emotions, to your thoughts, when you consume a substance that is in your possession. That is all they care about. And that's why I have the freedom of thought claim, because they're not allowed to go in and investigate what we might be thinking, what we might be feeling if we consume a substance. They can't go there. But that's 90% of the drug evaluations are investigating just that. So everything, yes. I mean, you would be blown away at the statements that are in these evaluations. So what they're doing is they're looking for, like, the main focus of their investigations, their evaluations of each substance that comes under, that is scheduled. They're looking at its potential for abuse. Well, we have to ask, what is abuse? Everyone just kind of thinks like, oh, abuse, yeah, that's bad. We don't want drug abuse, blah, blah, blah. Well, abuse refers to our thoughts, feelings, and desires before we consume a substance, while we're, after we've consumed the substance, and then afterwards. What are we thinking once we're done consuming that substance?
So where's the abuse in that? I don't understand. Like,
yeah.
I'm with you. Like, I don't understand I can understand maybe if you took this substance and it made everyone sick, and that would then overload the medical system, which then would hurt other people. Like, that's something you could actually understand as an argument, right? Like,
Yeah.
I get that. Like, we shouldn't probably drink bleach, but it's not illegal to drink bleach.
Yeah,
which is weird.
Exactly. It's not, because it doesn't affect your thoughts or moods.
Yeah,
so
that's
they don't care.
weird. It's weird. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So that's exactly what they're looking for. And it's so obvious. It's all right there. It's hard to express because to me it's so obvious. So what they do, they look at, let's say a substance comes to their attention that it might affect our thoughts, moods, or whatever. Well, then they require, whether it's a pharmaceutical company or just the FDA in general, if it doesn't come from a pharmaceutical company, they're looking at what it does to our thoughts, feelings, and desires. And that's 90% of what they're looking for. So
when you're saying that it's 100% illegal and unconstitutional.
Yep, 100%. It should be a clear cut. I mean, there's really no such thing as a checkmate argument in law, but this is.
But it's,
if they have the courage and non-corruption to see it. This is really actually a whistleblower action. So I have this document, which is the guidance for pharmaceutical companies. If a pharmaceutical company has a CNS drug and they want to get that approved by the FDA. So essentially it's the DEA defers it to HHS. Then HHS defers the evaluations to FDA. Well, the FDA actually defers the evaluations to the pharmaceutical companies themselves and says, okay, you need to document what this might do to people's moods, to people's thoughts, to people's feelings. And we require you to study on animals. The reason they do studies on rats is to determine what we as humans might be thinking, might be feeling when we consume these substances. They actually assign, this is in their evaluation documents too, public record, they assign government employees to go to the internet and go to chat rooms and try to determine if people are talking about substances and taking them. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Why are they taking these? Do they want to feel a certain way? They actually assign people to go do that, and they document that in the evaluations. Okay, people are taking this because they want to feel this, and that's bad. So therefore,
and they get to determine what bad is.
Exactly. It's all, let's document what people might be thinking. And of course, it's all speculation because you can't know what's internal of somebody.
Yeah, no.
And if it causes someone, okay, so another thing, there's a lot of stuff, so I'm trying to say it concisely, but the main thing that they're looking for, because they have guidance documents of how to evaluate drugs, and this is what they give to the pharmaceutical companies, what they're supposed to document. The main thing they're looking for is euphoria. That is a key element, is euphoria. And they actually put that in the document. And what is euphoria? Extreme happiness. So if a drug is likely to cause euphoria, which they actually define, I mean, I looked, the dictionary, and that's how it defines it. But they actually define it as abnormal thinking, which who determines what is abnormal thinking, for one?
Right.
Changes in mood, elevated mood.
Okay.
I can't remember what else, but that is considered a key finding. And that is what these pharmaceutical companies and the FDA are looking for. Is there indications of changes in mood and euphoria specifically? And that's their main goal, is to determine with every Evaluation. Every time something is scheduled, and even in the beginning, when there's lots of things that were scheduled without really having these evaluations, they were just initially scheduled when the Controlled Substances Act and these treaties were put into place. It was done with no logic, with no lawful justification. And there's some quotes in there that, like, okay, so when I was researching for the international treaties, I was looking at documents from the World Health Organization because they're the ones who essentially are tasked with evaluating substances that are under those treaties. And then they evaluate, they give their recommendation, and then the Secretary General of the United Nations, based off the WHO's recommendation, says, okay, these are going to be scheduled like this. Well, the WHO is given so much discretion. There's really not any guidelines. They can say whatever they want. And so I found a document from 1965 that I cited in the complaint, where they essentially went through different categories of substances. And this is what they used this document as basis to determine, to command the countries that were, that are parties to criminalize or not criminalize, or, to make it where people can't even possess this. And so in that document, they went through different categories of substances. And one of the substances was morphine type drugs, so opiates, all that stuff. And they went through and said, this can cause, physical dependency within a couple of days. It can cause harm. It's toxic, all this stuff. It can cause psychological dependency, bad. And then in that same document, they analyzed what they called LSD type substances. That's just what they kind of categorized everything as at that point in time in 1965. And in that section, they said, does not cause dependency. People could use them, and if they don't have it again, they're fine. It doesn't cause physical or psychological dependency, but it is used by nonconformists. It is used by those with intellectual and artistic pursuits. It is used by the people to gain insight into their personal issues. It is used by people to expand their consciousness.
Sounds like a good thing.
And so what's the result of that document? These treaties that say those substances that people are using to expand their minds by nonconformists cannot possess whatsoever, Schedule 1. And then the morphine type that causes all this harm and everything, we're going to put that in Schedule 4. I think it was Schedule 4 or Schedule 3.
So there was never really like any sort of actual logical basis for any of this.
And they've gotten away with it.
Because the scale that they were using to determine all this was just wrong from the beginning. Like, yeah, they did the research, and yeah, they did all this. They have the numbers, but the way the questions they were asking were essentially flawed from the very beginning. So there was no way to get. Okay.
So like those statements really have no business even being in government documents.
No.
What we're thinking, none. What we're feeling. Yeah. There's also I also quoted. It was something from, I think it's still from the World Health Organization, but it was talking about what is psychological dependency. And they wrote in there how many times a day a person thinks about using a substance. This is in documents that have led to the death and criminalization of millions of people. These statements should never even be in those documents, but they're everywhere. That's why it just blows me away. Like, how is this? These are, it's amazing. So these have no place being in government documents, any of those things, much less being created into one of the most harmful, highly resulting in the most imprisonment of humans based on this. And so that's the First Amendment freedom of thought claim. It's a whistleblower. It's a prosecuting. I'm not defending or standing up for our rights. We already have our rights. What I'm doing is I'm calling out the government saying, you cannot go in there. You are not allowed to go in those sacred realms.
Right.
And it is everywhere. Everywhere you turn. It's even in the preamble of what the purpose of the Controlled Substances Act and those international treaties are. They say to combat and prevent drug abuse. So that means their purpose is to combat and prevent certain thoughts, feelings, and desires that they don't want.
Okay, yeah. So when you hear drug abuse, you think of people getting sick or harmed, or because I see what happens when people get addicted to painkillers. Like you can see them, their lives get worse clearly because they're in, well, first of all, they're in pain, so that sucks. Like, I'm not saying painkillers should be illegal, but like you can tell, like, the life starts to leave them and they get grumpy and angry and they feel like crap. But that's harmful. It's almost like you assume abuse means harm, personal or external harm, but not, oh, this is like, they've like twisted the meaning of the word abuse. And that's where
Yes,
all this is coming from. Okay.
exactly. And they cast a spell onto humanity that we're okay with that because we just think, oh, abuse is bad. Let's condone the
Yeah.
government imprisoning
Yeah.
people because they use non-government approved products. Like we are okay with our fellow human. I mean, that's no different as if I were to possess like some homemade juice or some homemade, if I made homemade like body products like shampoo or whatever. And because the government doesn't have their label and they're not getting their cut
Right.
on that, no, we're
Right.
putting you in prison. It is no different. And they might
Because
say, oh,
that could,
it's because we can't verify that you've pasteurized that product enough for your safety. They might make up something like that.
and you could see now, if your product was then causing harm to people and they could prove that, then you'd be like, okay, well, that I get that argument, but they're not even going to that far. They're just,
Well, yeah.
they're not even
Yeah.
doing that part of it. Okay.
Well, and that's
Jesus.
okay, that's the other part of it. Like, okay, so let's
Yeah.
say we have a like this is all about the consumer. This is a punishing consumers, which has
Right.
never been done before.
No.
This is huge that it's straight up genocide. And so let's say we have a bad product out there. Are we going to punish the consumer for buying that product? No,
Well,
you're going to
yes,
go to the manufacturer and
you
say,
should. Yeah.
hey, you can't
Stop
do
making
that,
that. Right.
You're not going to say, oh, they're using it irresponsibly. They're using it in a way that we didn't want. So therefore, you should pit that consumer who purchased this product, who is now feeling these things or who might, now their liver is harmed, whatever, they deserve to be in prison. And that's what we're doing. It's like
Doesn't make
it's
any sense. Okay.
punishing
Yeah.
non-compliant consumers
Right.
and
Right.
not the manufacturer or anything.
Wow. Wow.
And that's all it is. It's show us your papers. It's like, okay, we
Yeah.
don't care about the harm.
Okay.
You have drugs in your pocket. Let's see the papers. You got your papers, the prescription. Okay, you're good. We'll let you go. Oh, you don't got
Yeah.
your papers. You didn't go through us. You didn't go through our drug dealers. You didn't go through our system. Then you're
Yeah.
going to prison. It's non-compliant. It's a totally consumer law to create a monopoly of it, taking over the entire healthcare system.
All right.
Yeah.
January 2023.
So what happened
Yeah.
next? This is normal. Whenever someone files a lawsuit, they file a complaint. What will normally happen in litigation is that the defendants will file a motion to dismiss. And what they're saying there is essentially we shouldn't even waste our time going to trial, going through the discovery phase, interviews, all that, requesting documents. We shouldn't even go there and waste anybody's time because these claims have no basis in law. Because I mean, really anyone
Okay.
can file a lawsuit, but if it's
Yeah.
like bogus, then you're not going to make the defendants and the courts and everyone go through the whole process. You can say, no, let's throw it out now. And so that's normal, So they filed motions to dismiss. The United States and the state of Arizona and filed motions to dismiss. And I, of course, got the opportunity to respond to that. And it's supposed to be fairly lenient for the plaintiff, for the person bringing the claim, because you don't really have to prove, you're not supposed to have to prove your claims right out the gate. You just have
Yes.
to at least say, this is my claims, and these are just enough facts to show this is why the claim applies.
You basically have to prove that it's not frivolous. Just like,
Yeah.
here, I didn't just write this thing and hand it in. I actually have reasons. Here's
Yeah.
some top level reasons. Let's go. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not supposed to, because you're not supposed to be completely barred from the courts. That's
Right.
why it's supposed to be pretty lenient. It's like, okay, we
Right.
don't expect these people, especially if it's someone who's not an attorney wants to bring something, it's supposed to be available to people. You just have enough intelligence in there, some logic connecting the dots. With how significant this is and the claims that I brought, I wasn't really expecting the federal district court to continue with this because they're not going to want to touch this. Because by them saying, yes, she has claims and all that, that's a decision they don't want to make. They want to push that up and push it up. They're like, I'm not touching that. That's too big. To end the war on drugs, I'm not even touching that. With the judge, after getting the motion to dismiss and me, responding, then I waited 9 months for the judge. I was checking email every day. It was a grueling 9 months, but I was, waiting for that decision. And I knew whatever that decision was, the judge could either dismiss some of the claims and keep some, which is kind of usually what happens. He could dismiss all the claims, or he could keep all the claims.
And this is up to the judge's discretion, the sole judge.
Mhm. Yep. This is the single judge right here for
in the Federal District Court of
yeah.
Arizona. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So best case scenario would have been for me to dismiss all the claims, because if he dismisses some of the claims and not all the claims, like let's say he dismissed my First Amendment claim and my due process claim, but kept the others, I would not be able to appeal those claims because I would have to go to trial on the other claims and wait till those were done.
Which just takes more resources and time and all that type of stuff. Okay.
Exactly. And I'm by myself, like I can do it. I can do the depositions and go through all the discovery. I know I would figure it out, but yes. So when I got the decision, it was actually it was the best thing that could have happened. He dismissed all the claims, but he gave me standing. So he said I had a right, I had injury, and standing is huge. To get standing, like that's a big hurdle.
Okay.
So it was beautiful because he gave me what he did is essentially give me a golden ticket to the Ninth Circuit, because that was my next step.
Now the next level of court.
Yeah, which is fast tracking me to the United States Supreme Court.
Wow.
So it was good. My next step then. So I got that in March of last year. I got that decision.
Okay. March of 2024.
Yeah.
He gives you get standing and all your claims dismissed. And so now you're going up to a higher court, I'm assuming.
Yes. So now it's time to draft my appellate brief. And so, I'm still by myself, but
could you do is there a quick explanation of what an appellate brief is?
Essentially asking that court to review the district court's decision and saying, you know what, the district court should not have dismissed this because I clearly stated claims that had merits. And so that's my job in the appellate brief, is to say that. That this is what happened. They dismissed this. They shouldn't have dismissed it because, this and this and this. So that was filed August of last year.
August of 2024. Okay.
Yes. I knew that whatever the Ninth Circuit decided, what I thought is that it was going to be big, because whether they decided in my favor or not, it is the Ninth Circuit. And for them to analyze these claims, everything that I put out there, exposing decades of unlawful government conduct and the corruption and everything, and whatever they said, good or bad, whatever, it would be known. It would be, it would have impact because it's the Ninth Circuit. And so very few cases, they get thousands of appeals every year. And very few cases get called for oral argument. And what that is where the court, the Ninth Circuit, kind of sees the briefs and they say, you know what, we want a little bit more understanding about this. So we're going to call in the parties and ask them to present orally.
That sounds like a good thing for you.
Yes. So I got the news on December 6th. I got an email, it was a Saturday, saying that they wanted to do oral argument. So just less than 4 months after I filed the brief. I wasn't expecting to hear anything for a long time. I got the news and I literally fell to my knees crying, mainly because that means that I did so much work on myself that I could actually stand up in front of the Ninth Circuit and talk on behalf of all the people. It was just an unbelievable moment. It's been a really rough journey.
Wow. Yeah.
Thinking I've been on the border of, I'm always questioning, am I delusional? It's no one else really sees this dream, this huge thing other than me, like my best friend does. And I've lost family over this. I've, lost a lot of, there's just people that don't understand, that don't want to see, they're jealous. I don't know what it is.
You're shaking up their idea of the world. I mean, that's really what you're doing. Wow.
Yeah. So I've had to work on my self-protection and everything. I have a very good communication relationship with my higher selves and my team and everything. And I know I'm so protected, and so it's been quite a journey. It's been very challenging, especially being alone 99% of the time for the past 3 years.
I bet.
That's a different type of mastery right there. Yeah. And to be able to do this too, to the fear, because to step off the chessboard, have to dare to unveil the matrix and everything.
Yeah.
There's energies that come,
Yes.
they try to stop you. And I knew that. And I've received training, training to recognize those energies. And I'm fearless because I see them. They can't get to me. And so that's why I was put in this position to be able to do this and challenge these, and also hidden. Because I thought this was going to blow up when I brought when I filed the complaint, I thought it was going to be like on the news and everything was
Yeah.
going to be big and everything, and I reached out to people,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
nothing,
But
nothing.
you weren't ready for that yet.
No.
And so it couldn't, because you weren't ready, so it couldn't happen.
Yeah.
Wow. And you
Yeah.
couldn't have done anything to make yourself ready any faster than you did. Like the process is the process.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I just trusted. I trust that I was, because I mean, I truly believe if those energies really knew how much of a threat this is, then it would be a different story. But I think everything's been veiled, everything's been cloaked. You know, I trust that.
Wow.
But now
Wow.
there's still a part of me that doesn't know what's going to happen. Like this might. So, okay. So we can go
Yeah.
back
So,
to.
okay. We're in December. Thank you. Thank you. We're
No,
in
thank
December,
you. I love talking about that stuff too.
December 2024. You get that you're in an oral argument, which is, I know this one. It's scheduled for April
Yeah.
1st, 2025. All right. So, hey, I knew something. So what happens in between December and April to, like, what are you doing in that time span?
So my goal was for those few months was to take care of myself and to prepare to go, like, it was interesting. It was a new energy that I had never felt. But what I was called to do was to just purify my vessel and make sure that I was ready for whatever energy wanted to work through me
Mhm.
during that oral argument,
Mhm.
that it could. And so my job was just to be a clean channel, a clean vessel, and trust and surrender to whatever wanted to work through me that day on April 1st. But 2 weeks before oral argument, I got notification that they canceled it.
Ugh.
They decided to
Ugh.
just make the decision based off of the briefs alone. Yeah,
There's
it
no,
was
and there's
okay.
and
I was
there
like, okay.
and there's no appealing that, I'm assuming. There's no appeal involved in that.
No.
That's annoying.
So, yeah.
All right.
But it was okay. You know, I
Yeah.
trust, I don't really look at anything bad, you know, at all. I trust because I just trust the design. This is so out of my hands. All I can do is the best I can do. And I don't, you know, I don't ever put any pressure on myself. Like, oh
Right.
no, it should be different.
And your brief is really good. Your lawsuit is really good. Like your research is really good. Like it's not like this is hurting your argument at all. You just don't get the chance to
Yes.
amplify the power, which may be why they canceled it, because they
Oh, I
knew
know.
that. Okay. All right.
Yep. Because I had a good friend
Okay.
who was calling the courts trying to figure out
Right.
how many people can they seat, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so
Right.
who knows? There's a chance that they got a word and they're like, no. And so then, okay, so then I didn't know I was gonna get a notification, but I got a notification on April 1st from the courts saying, okay, the briefs have officially been submitted to these 3 judges. So I'm like, okay, you know, this could take 3 to 6 months, whatever, for them to do a decision. This is still good. It's just I don't have that platform, you know, publicly to speak. And then not 5 business days later, or 1 week later, on April 7th, I got the decision from the Ninth Circuit. And it is, you know, all my vision of all of this, what they did is something I never guessed they would do. They, because I thought at a minimum, this is the courts, I put so much, it's like a research paper, you know, of so much stuff. And it is beautiful. You know, I'm very proud of myself of what I wrote.
Yeah.
And what they did is they only took a few days. They looked at this.
Of course.
And they wrote just a few sentences, and they said, this is a non-public, this opinion is not to be published, and it is not to be used as precedent for anything. And they agreed with the district court and they applied incorrect law. They just wrote a few sentences and said, done, gone. That was really disheartening because I just had not considered they wouldn't even analyze the claims.
Right.
And so essentially what they did was such an injustice to the people.
Right.
Because that is our only opportunity. I'm essentially prosecuting the government for unlawful actions. We have no other option but to bring it to the court's attention.
Yeah.
You know, if they violating the Constitution, they're intruding on our rights. You know, they're doing unlawful things. That is our avenue as the people.
Yeah. This is how we redress our grievances. Instead of burning buildings down, we file lawsuits.
Exactly. And they just brushed it under the rug, didn't even analyze it, didn't even like question anything, and they applied incorrect law.
Jesus.
So one of the things that really upset me is that when I was granted standing, I was actually denied standing to bring claims against those 2 international treaties because they said they're not domestic law. They have to be domestic law to be adjudicated in domestic courts, but that's not true. Things become domestic law through acts of Congress. So there can be international treaties out there, but if Congress, if those treaties are then enacted into a federal law, then they're now law that I can challenge. Anybody can challenge. But what they said is, like, they lied. They completely applied incorrect law, and they said because these treaties are non-self-executing, meaning they weren't immediately put into law the second the United States signed them, back in 1965, then therefore I can't challenge them. But they were clearly put into domestic law. All the things that I cite as, using, possessing, whatever, were scheduled through those international treaties. And those international treaties were then taken and then they're written into the Controlled Substances Act that they said we are implementing these treaties into law. Yeah. And therefore, in the United States government, whatever the World Health Organization decides, they just automatically schedule according to that. So they've now made these things untouchable. So now we have a law that is causing the imprisonment of millions of people that are unchallenged, that they have stated we can't challenge them. That is so unconstitutional.
That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense.
I know. It was a big injustice for all the people.
You should be able to challenge any law. I'm not saying you're going to win, but you should be able to challenge it.
Exactly. And they said no. They made those untouchable. So, yeah.
Okay, well.
So.
What's next?
So what's next is the United States Supreme Court. But now seeing what the Ninth Circuit could do, that they could just brush this under the rug and not even look at it, it really confirmed to me that this could be over, because the United States Supreme Court is not required to even look at this at all. Like, the appellate courts are at least required to say something. They're required. But the United States Supreme Court, they get lots of petitions every year. And they can say, nah, we're not going to look at it. No, they're not required. So I could draft this petition and write all of that, like this was an injustice, everything. And they could just say, nope. Because they might decide that they don't even want to touch the war on drugs. For them to decide that, yes, we could potentially end the war on drugs, they might, politically motivated, financially motivated, whatever, they could so easily just ignore this and it is done.
Jesus.
So yeah, that's the reality I'm facing right now, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, and to tie this into other things, this is why people riot. This is why protesting happens. Yeah. But this is why this happens, because you have laws that are unchallengeable by the system that you've agreed to operate under. And what do you do?
Yeah. And I exposed so much illegal government conduct. That's the thing. Like, I brought it to the courts, like, hey, look, this is what you're supposed to be able to do. Look at what the government's doing. This is illegal. And they're just going to say, we're not even going to, I got silenced and everything. And it's just like, I do live in a rainbow colored, glasses world, and I refuse to leave that world. But this was kind of a shock. This was kind of like, okay, this might be for nothing. But not nothing, but I've had to accept different realities. It's just a lot to work through. I've been on this journey long enough where I'm not letting it too much, but I have, for my own well-being, I have retracted my power, my energy back to myself, because now it's like, what do I do with my life? I've just been waiting for signs from the universe. I've spent all my money, and like the financial concerns are a big thing for me. I've spent thousands of dollars. I've gone thousands of dollars into debt for this. Yes, I chose to do that, but it came in January where I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to pay rent this month. And that's what I've been kind of, facing. So it's like, what have I done? Have I sacrificed my well-being and everything for this? And so I'm still going to write the petition. By the end of June is when it's due, or it's due like the first week of July, but I want to finish about the end of June. And then they have 60 days where they're going to say whether they're going to hear it or not. So we're going to know all this pretty soon. Again, it's, focusing on my well-being and my story, my identity. It's not that, I'm just this freedom fighter that's sacrificing my whole life and well-being and all that for this and all my money and everything. Like, I'm trying to change that identity, because what I did was incredible.
Yeah.
Or people don't have the courage to sit with no one telling them, no corporation, no employer, nothing, no one giving them money, nothing, to actually sit for hours and hours and hours and draft this and do this.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it is, yeah. So I'm just working on that right now, trying to figure out what do I do now with my
Okay.
life,
Okay.
and working on maybe being okay, like asking for, doing fundraising, things like that.
So I was going to ask that. Do you have like a Venmo or anything like that, or anything that you could just, I'm not saying to ask for money, but if we could put up a link and maybe someone who's interested could send some funds and send some energy in the form of cash there, like, are you okay with that?
I'm totally okay with that,
Okay.
because it's not for me. It is actually for the
No.
people. And what I have
Yeah.
learned is that for me to sit down and not have to worry about finding a
Yeah.
job, that's
Right.
at the forefront of my mind right now,
Right.
when it should be on drafting this petition for United
Right.
States Supreme Court. This is our last chance. This could change the world. And for my energy to be on that for the benefit of humanity and everything, it is important that I am not having to worry about how the heck am I going to pay rent this month.
And I mean, and we even had to postpone this interview a couple of times because you were worried about trying to pay rent. You're trying to do, I don't know, you were doing gig work or something like that, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not ashamed to ask for funding, because this is important. It's not for me. It is for the people, so that I can have my energy focused on drafting this. This is a chance that humanity has. This chance might not come again. No chance like this to end the war on drugs has come before. And it's to have it go through legislation, all that, that's not going to happen. This is it. And so my energy needs to be on this draft, the most beautiful petition. So I have a website. It's decrimourminds.org. But the lawsuits on there, I wrote it for the general public, and I published it for people to read. So everything's on there. The complaint is on there, all my different filings, the appeal is on there. And
right. Well, let's get that message out and see how many other people are interested in this, because there has to be more. I mean, not that you're not a unique individual, because you are, but there has to be people that would be in support of this and understand what you're going through and understand your concept and all that. We've been talking for 2 hours now. I'm about running out of energy just because this is awesome, and I'm assuming you are too, because I don't think you probably talk this much to people. So I want to thank you so much for talking to me, because this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing your energy and your time and all of this knowledge, because this has been I've been wanting to talk to you ever since I met you a couple of years ago. I was like, I want to know more about this, but I never could figure out how to. And now I know why, because you were doing really good work. You need to be on your own. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much. I mean, it means so much to me to have someone who actually understands and I can talk to, because it's very hard to talk to anybody about this, and you made it so easy. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything that I have not asked that you really want people to know?
The main thing that people can do, and that I just think is so important, is just so many people talk about other people and like worried about other people. Like you hear things like, oh, I don't want people going around getting high. I don't want this or that. And that we need to hold ourselves just as accountable as we do the government and the pharmaceutical companies.
I like it.
Because that's honestly none of your business. It's nobody's business what my state of mind is. By even throwing, I hear people throw out phrases like, we should be using, it's even plant medicines and plant medicine community, we should be using it responsibly. We should not be using it in this way. Oh, you're abusing the medicine. What that does is puts you in a position, you're defining what is responsible and then saying how someone else should have their human experience. And if it doesn't comply with whatever you think it should be, then you are casting shame onto them.
Yeah. Right.
That judgment onto them.
Right.
And there's just so much of that goes on. So I'm not for anything that has control over humans. It should be about, if anything about even like legal therapeutic, using plant medicines in therapy setting or whatever, a lot of it is based off of what I just see this everywhere. I'm very sensitive to it, how people are using it, not on how people are providing it. Yes, regulate providers, everything, but the actual human, how we have our human experience, and like it should be of no concern what someone else's state of mind is. If you don't want people going around getting high, please I want people to listen to what they're actually saying. And if they're not sure if they even want drugs to be decriminalized, like to actually think it through. Like what you're saying is you don't want someone to experience a state of mind that you have decided they shouldn't experience. And they belong in a cage if they do experience that state of mind. That's nobody's, and I think it starts with ourselves, like when we realize how sacred our thoughts and our feelings are and how they're ours, they're nobody else's. When you start to honor yourself and feel that, then it becomes easier to honor others and to see what this really is about, the war on drugs and the criminalization and everything. So I would just, ask people to recognize the sacredness within themselves and how sacred their human experiences, their lifetime here on earth is, and to only worry about that and to feel that. And then that protection, I would imagine it would then grow into no one gets to touch this. No one gets to tell me what I get to think, what I get to feel, and when you feel that in you, that natural protectiveness, then that's what helps this grow and helps the belief around the lawsuit and not needing to go into other people's realms and human experiences and judge those, worry about yourself and protect your own. And it's beautiful. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Very eloquent and beautiful. I really appreciate that. All right. So thank you very much, Jennifer. This has been fantastic.